Welcome back to another weekly recap and Q&A in the lovely sport of college basketball. I might add, this season is going way too fast. 4 weeks from today, you're going to be filling out brackets like an absolute madman, like a psychopath, which is crazy to think how fast the season has gone. Nonetheless, let's get on with the Q&A. After the loss to Auburn, did that show the true colors of Alabama? In a way, it did, but not in like a negative way that I think it's time to worry about Alabama after losing to Auburn. They have so much offensive scoring talent and depth, and they win through that because they played that super fast pace and they go and let their talent win their games. Auburn is one of like 2 or 3 teams in the country that can handle Alabama at their best, and that wasn't even Alabama at their best. I take more positive for Auburn than I do negative for Alabama from that game. I'm not worrying about Alabama after this, but in terms of those true colors, this is their style, and this is the downside of their style. They're going to be able to beat 99.9% of teams in the country on any given day, maybe even 100 at their best. But like we saw last year when they ran into UConn in the tournament, they will run into a team that can give them issues like Auburn, maybe like a Houston can or something like that. Is this year's Auburn team better than Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler's team? 100%, because that team was awesome, but that team was unexpectedly good, and they peaked way too early. I think they ended the year like 4-5 and dropped from a 1 to a 2 seed at basically the worst time of the season. They ended up losing in the round of 32 to Miami. This Auburn team is not going to be falling off. It would have already started like it started for that team back a couple of years ago. They're going to be a 1 seed, and I find it hard to believe that they're not going to be in the Sweet 16 with the way they're playing right now. Which team has the most to prove in this year in March Madness? I think it's great timing in the video because I think Auburn is the team at the top of the list. They're not only trying to avenge the loss against Yale when people were super high on them like I was last year, but they're the best team in the country right now. So when you combine how good they are, how outspoken they are in a way, along with last year's loss to Yale in the first round of the tournament, I'd put Auburn at the top. I'd probably put Michigan State up next because people were having dangerous conversations about them. They still are, that they're like a top 8 to 10 team in the country and they can go to the Final Four and maybe contend for a national championship. But then there's also some doubters, and it's also Michigan State, and they have a great brand. They have Tom Izzo, who probably needs to succeed in the modern version of the game a little more than he has in the past, but hasn't really broken through recently. Speaking of the Big Ten, how many Big Ten teams will make the tournament this year? Purdue, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Maryland are all 100% locks. That's 5. UCLA, Illinois, Oregon are going to be fine. Nebraska's probably going to be fine too. That makes 9. Ohio State, I think, is more than likely going to get in. They're in right now, and I think the bubble being so soft definitely helps them. They would make 10. Indiana is probably the only team that could get an at-large, but realistically, Ohio State would make 10. I don't think Indiana's going to get in, so I'll go with 10. Speaking of the Terps, can Maryland go deep for real in the tournament this year? Big Ten margins are super tight, like they are every year, so people are kind of finding it tough to decipher who the best team is, especially for the tournament. I see the top 5 teams in the Big Ten as a really tight cluster with a gap ahead of the rest. I don't think Maryland is convincingly the best team in the Big Ten for sure, but I do think that they are the most well set up to succeed in March. They have one of the best starting 5s in the entire country, a 2-big mismatch, a go-to guard, 2 really good 2-way shooting wings. They're shooting at a really high level from 3 right now, top 50 in the country. They don't turn the ball over. They run good sets to exploit mismatches, but they have guys like Jacoby and Derek Queen and even Rodney Rice that if you need a bucket, you can go to one of those dudes. They've got a top 20 defense in the country that I think is super underrated. It forces a lot of turnovers. It pushes guys into late shot clock heaves. They're really balanced, and there's really no weakness in their style and their game outside of not having a lot of reliable depth, which could definitely be a concern if you run into injury issues or foul trouble and stuff, but at some point you're going to have to rely on your best guys late in the game. But that balanced style can compete with any style of team in the entire country, so I think that sets them up well for the NCAA tournament to be playing teams from all over, even though while the Big Ten is a complete mosh pit and they might not be the clear best team in the Big Ten. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is UConn to three-peat, 1 being low, 10 being high? I'd go with like a 1.1. Every single thing mathematically gives them a 0% chance, not even a 1% chance. Their defense being the biggest concern for sure. They're losing to Seton Hall. They're playing with no consistency. They're sitting around like a 9 seed right now, getting dangerously close to the bubble. They're going to get into the tournament. Dan Hurley is a lot of things. People will say a lot of things, but one thing I can guarantee is that he is not going to let this team miss the tournament after back-to-back titles. In terms of a three-peat, it ain't happening. Could they go on a run in March? For sure, if they figure things out in the next few weeks, but from the looks of it, they got to worry about their first game in the tournament in the round of 64 against a team just as good as them before they're worrying about winning a national title again. 3 of the 5 first-team All-American spots seem to be locked up between Cooper Flagg, Janiah Broome, and Braden Smith. Who are your final 2? Cooper Flagg and Janiah Broome are definitely the 2 National Player of the Year candidates. They're guaranteed locks for first team All-American. Nobody else is a lock right now. He's not a lock, but I would still put Braden Smith on that list. He has been unbelievable, carrying Purdue, a top 20 team in the country. It's tough to say that there's been any guard in the entire country that has been better than him. After that, it's kind of wide open. I'd probably say Ryan Kalkbrenner should get the nod for me. 19-9, 3 blocks a game, carrying Creighton along with Stephen Ashworth, who maybe deserves a nod. You gotta take team success into it a little bit. That's why I think Eric Dixon is definitely an All-American, but I think he's probably a second or third team All-American because Nova is not great. Speaking of team success, like Florida has been unbelievable. Walter Clayton has been the hub of that, and he's been unreal. So I would find it hard not to make him my 5th guy. Man, Mark Sears, Donovan Dent, PJ Haggerty, Cam Jones are all right there, and they're all elite guards running great teams. Feels like a good time for a Mountain West update. Where do teams like Colorado State and Boise stand? Usually it's tough and super tight at the top of the Mountain West, but New Mexico has solidified themselves as the best team in the league, like without a doubt, 100%. You cannot deny that. They're 14-1. They swept Utah State. They're the best metric ranked team in the league. They're the best, most talented team. After that, Utah State isn't a tournament lock, but they're going to be fine. They have done enough to feel okay right now. San Diego State is definitely a bubble team. It was a strong week for them, and I do think that the early season non-conference wins versus UC San Diego, Creighton, and Houston are going to be what carries them into the tournament and what should make them feel pretty good. And then there's Colorado State, Boise State, Nevada, and UNLV in that next chunk that are not going to get at-large bids, so they're going to need to win the Mountain West tournament. I'd say Colorado State has the best chance out of those teams. They've been the best in conference, and they've got Nick Clifford. But we're probably looking at around 3 teams from the Mountain West in the NCAA tournament this year: San Diego State, Utah State, and New Mexico. Which mid-major conferences can get multiple bids this year? The Mountain West, which I just talked about, for sure is going to have 2, if not 3+ between New Mexico, Utah State, and San Diego State. Even though it hasn't been great, the WCC is going to get St. Mary's and Gonzaga in for sure. The A10 can only do it if VCU or George Mason work their way firmly above the bubble to get an at-large bid. I'd say that VCU has the better resume to do that, so they're probably going to have to almost win out or win most of their games rest of the way until the A10 tournament. Similar for the Big West, UC San Diego has the better resume versus UC Irvine's, but they're both at-large candidates. But the best path for the Big West getting their 2 bids is they meet in the Big West tournament final. UC San Diego wins out until then. UC Irvine wins that tournament final, and then they both maybe get in. Memphis is a tournament lock in the AAC, so if someone can beat them in the AAC tournament, which they have looked very, very vulnerable versus inferior opponents multiple times, then they could get 2 bids out of the AAC. And then the MVC is the only other possibility. Drake is an at-large team to me, especially with how weak the bubble is. Unless Drake is going to lose 1 or 2 more really bad games out of nowhere, I think Drake deserves to be in the tournament regardless. Obviously, it would take Bradley, who just beat them, or UNI or someone good to beat Drake in the MVC Arch Madness tournament, probably in the finals, to get 2 teams out of the MVC in. So Mountain West, WCC for sure. A10, Big West, MVC, AAC have a possibility for 2 bids that are non-power conferences this year. Thoughts on Yale? They are absolutely tearing through the Ivy League right now. They are for sure. Everyone remembers Yale from beating Auburn in that crazy tournament game in the first round last year. With the way they're playing lately and their experience, they're probably going to be a team to worry about again in March. They're on a 10-game win streak. They're 9-0 in Ivy play, and they really are just dismantling teams. They already beat Princeton twice. They beat Akron, who's the hottest team in the country right now. They played Purdue back in November very, very tightly and well. They run their team through 3 players. John Poulikitis is their go-to guy. He's the leading scorer in the Ivy League, and you remember him. You remember him hitting up crazy shots and going absolutely ballistic against Auburn last year. Had 28 in that game to get that victory. And they got Bezenbang at the guard spot, 2-time Ivy Defensive Player of the Year, and they have Nick Townsend, a great scorer, and really just an offensive Swiss Army knife of versatility. These 3 guys have all been at Yale for at least 3 years, and that speaks to their overall general experience and roster continuity. They have tournament experience all over the roster from last year. Disciplined, they're well coached, they don't make a ton of mistakes, and they're overall just really smart in how they score the ball, and they're really efficient because of that. They shoot at a high clip from 3, they shoot at a high clip inside. The Ivy League is a good conference, and even with how well they're playing, it's not going to be simple to just go beat Princeton for a 3rd time. But if they can get through, they're going to be around a 12 or 13 seed with tournament experience in their roster from beating Auburn in the first round last year. Yale is for sure a mid-major to watch and could for sure be a problem in your bracket again. Who do you think will land the Indiana job? I think I talked about this last week, but I want to do it again because the Indiana job isn't as incredible as you would think on the surface. They have support and resources, and they have history, but it comes from the Bob Knight days in like the 80s and 90s, and the team hasn't been good in over a decade. Nonetheless, Indiana job candidates. Brad Stevens was always an unrealistic pipe dream. Like, let's be real there. Nate Oates, Bruce Pearl, Scott Drew, you can make the calls, but they are not going to leave for the IU job. And the same for Dusty May. I know people think he's an Indiana guy. He was an Indiana manager back in the day. Like, it doesn't matter because IU was a year too late, and there's no reason for Dusty to make a lateral in-conference move after one season at Michigan. Then you get onto reality. First call has got to be TJ Otzelberger. Now, I don't know how realistic it is. I think it's a little more realistic than 0% like the other guys. I think Brad Brownell is a really good candidate. He's done a great job at Clemson, especially in the last few years, and he is Indiana born and raised. Will Wade is definitely worth the call. I think he'll probably end up somewhere south in the SEC or ACC, like Miami's job maybe. Buzz Williams could be poachable. I think he'd be good intensity for Indiana, and he has coached all over the place, so he's not like regionally restricted. And 3 underrated mid-major options that you might have to get down the list to. Ben McCollum at Drake. I know his first year in Division I, but he's won 4 D2 national titles, and he's kind of proving that good coaching wins at every single level, regardless of your resources also. So think what he can do at Indiana. Bryce Drew at GCU, I like a lot. He's had success as a coach, as a player, and people just don't talk about him enough. And I think this is the year that he takes a leap into a power job, wherever that's going to be. And Josh Schertz at SLU. He's doing a pretty good job this year in year 1. He did an amazing job at Indiana State before that. I think he's at least worth considering, especially as you get further down your list of guys with your offers. How many games do you manage to watch per week, and what's the most efficient way? I definitely watch way too many, and I will be honest about this. Like, I'm comfortable being open. It definitely affects my mental health. Like, I love college basketball. I love the sport. I truly love that games are always on, but like my anxiety of feeling like I have to watch every single game and like make sure I'm not missing stuff definitely gets very high. I'm an anxious person. Very rarely will I watch full 40-minute games, but a lot of the times I'll try to catch 20 to 30 minutes of majority of the games I want to watch. General cable or TV streaming subscriptions will cover a decent chunk of it, although the Paramount YouTube TV thing, without that for now. CBS Sports, ESPN channels, Fox Sports. I do think that ESPN Plus isn't the greatest product, but it's great for college basketball fans because ESPN Plus covers a majority of mid-major basketball in the entire country. So when you want to watch MVC and Big West and all these leagues around the country that aren't on TV, ESPN Plus is the best way to do it, and I actually think it's pretty affordable. That's going to do it for this week. Appreciate y'all for watching as always, especially if you're here at the end. Haven't subscribed, make sure to like, subscribe, put on notifications. March is it coming? I'm looking at my calendar. It's 2 weeks away. Oh my God, March, not even. It's less than 2 weeks away. The season goes by fast. Enjoy every bit of it. Appreciate y'all again. Peace.